Welcome to the St. Joseph Radio Presents live program, broadcasting to you from the Rome of the West, St. Louis, Missouri. The program that for over 30 years has brought you eloquent speakers from across the globe to help explain, clarify, and evangelize the Catholic faith. Our program covers a variety of topics relating to current issues and occurrences in our daily lives. Now, with the aid of technology, we are able to bring the gospel message to the four corners of the world, where Christ himself did say, "Those who have ears ought to hear." It is our hope at St. Joseph Radio that through these programs we can help evangelize the world and change one soul at a time. Now, here is your host to introduce today's guest and topic.
Good afternoon and welcome. You're listening to St. Joseph Radio, coming to you from St. Louis, Missouri, the Rome of the West. My name is Mark Serafino, and this is my co-host Michael Hayworth, and you're listening to our program, Man to Man. Welcome, everyone, and before we get started, as we normally do, I'd like to ask Michael, could you please open up with a prayer?
Absolutely. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. St. Joseph, whose protection is so great, so strong, and so prompt before the throne of God, I place in you all my interest and desires. O St. Joseph, do assist me by your powerful intercession, and obtain for me from your divine Son all spiritual blessings through Jesus Christ our Lord, so that having engaged here below your heavenly power, I may offer my thanksgiving and homage to the most loving of fathers. O St. Joseph, I never weary contemplating you and Jesus asleep in your arms. I dare not approach while he reposes near your heart. Press him in my name and kiss his fine head for me, and ask him to return the kiss when I draw my dying breath. St. Joseph, patron of parting souls, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen.
Thank you, Michael. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing very, very well, thank you. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you as well.
So our program is Man to Man, and we want to talk to you today about the elements of manhood. And we're going to start by reading a poem by a poet named Edgar Guest. Edgar Guest was born in England, and when he was 10 years old, his family and he moved to the United States, where they settled in Michigan, where Edgar Guest lived until he died in 1959. He was a prolific poet, and if you're unfamiliar with his poems, if you were to look into, there's volumes of books filled with his poems, and they're all written about family and family situations and circumstances. And one of my favorite poems is written by him, and it's called Only a Dad. So we'd like to start the program by sharing this poem with you. Only a dad. Only a dad with a tired face, coming home from the daily race, bringing little of gold or fame to show how well he has played the game, but glad in his heart that his own rejoice to see him come and to hear his voice. Only a dad with a brood of 4, one of 10 million men or more, plodding along in the daily strife, bearing the whips and scorns of life, with never a whimper of pain or hate, for the sake of those who at home await. Only a dad neither rich nor proud, merely one of the surging crowd, toiling, striving from day to day, facing whatever may come his way, silent whenever the harsh condemn, and bearing it all for the love of them. Only a dad, but he gives his all to smooth the way for his children small, doing with courage stern and grim the deeds that his father did for him. This is the line that for him I pen. Only a dad, but the best of men. So there you have it. The first time I read the poem, and every time I read the poem, it's to me almost like a roadmap for how to be a man. There's so many elements of manhood in here. Things like stoicism, responsibility, accountability, love, respect, courage, beauty, charity. It's all there in the way this marvelous poet has described being a dad.
It's one of those things that you're looking at as an example, and that really is one of those things that I think we all should always look for that example. If we want to better, if we want to evolve and do better as men, look for those things and opportunities that are out there, because there's plenty of examples that we have.
Yeah.
And be wise in your choice.
Absolutely. You know, when I read this poem for the first time, the stanza that stuck out to me was the second stanza, when he says, "One of 10 million men or more plodding along in the daily strife, bearing the whips and the scorns of life, with never a whimper of pain or hate, for the sake of those who at home await." It made me think of my father's stoicism. My father worked 7 days a week for as long as I can remember, even through my high school years. And in truth, I would have to really, really press to remember a day that he ever complained about it. He did it with a smile, and he did it well. And that was a great lesson for me in my parenthood of stoicism. And it's kind of, we've talked about this before, it's one of the best examples of being third. You know, my dad and dads like him who bear the whips and scorns of life for the sake of their family and the sake of their children. They're putting themselves third. God first, their family second, and then they.
And it's those things that they do, what men do on a regular basis. It's unseen, many times unheard, but it's the consistency, the devotion to being that person that can be depended upon.
Yes.
It's a quiet vocation.
Yes.
I don't look at it as something that you're always going to be recognized for.
No.
And it may be, and there was another poem, I don't know if you had seen it, but it talked about the different stages that a young man looks at his father. At first, you know, a young man as a child looks at his father with admiration, just, you know, wildly appreciative of what the dad does. And then as he gets older, that changes, right?
Yes.
Until he becomes a man himself and starts to realize, wow, that guy that I thought didn't know anything really does know a lot more. And at the very end, it also said, you know, the last days, I wish I knew more.
Yes.
You know, once the dad is gone.
Yes.
Wish I'd have listened more. But those are the things that we all go through. We all listen and experience these things. And hopefully we learn, and our children learn as well.
That's right. One of the other things that stuck out to me in this poem was the amount of courage that dads employ in doing their daily duties. It requires courage. You know, recently I was asked to give a talk at a customers of mine out in Kansas, and one of the things they wanted me to talk about was change. And as I was doing some research on change, I reached out to several people who I knew could give me good input. And one of the people came back and talked to me about the change of getting a new supervisor. And when they got a new supervisor, that new person persecuted them. There was just not a personality connection, and they felt that they were being unfairly managed and unfairly directed. And what struck me about this individual was they looked at themselves and said, this is how I'm feeling, but how much of it is me and how much of it is because this person is correct in their assessment. Maybe their style is different than I would like it to be, but is there something in there about me that I could make better that would do a better job for my company? And that takes a tremendous amount of humility and courage to be able to do that.
There's a lot of times where I feel like when something like that comes along and you are able to reflect, I think that's so important. That shows a bit of maturity, too, when somebody does come back later and says, you know, I didn't like the way you said it. I didn't feel good about it. No, get those things out of the way. But rationalize and start realizing, hey, you know, actually, there's something I can glean from this.
Yes.
So those are the pieces that, as a man, you have to work through those things and not live in emotions alone.
There's so many forms of stoicism. To go back to that, I can recall my grandfather, when he was rather old, he had reached the point where it was difficult for him to shave himself. And he shaved with a straight razor. And I could recall being at their house one time, the whole family was gathered, and he needed a shave. And they didn't have the shaving cream to put on his face, so they had to do it dry with a straight razor. It was clear that it hurt. It was clear that it was uncomfortable. What stuck out to me, and I was a little boy, was watching him endure it stoically. He didn't complain. He didn't cry out. And it occurred to me that there was an example there. There was an example that this is a state in life that I have been thrust into, and I must accept what comes along with that, including a little bit of a discomfort and pain. And it's an example he was teaching those around us that in the grand scheme of things, this is a very small pain. But you accept it, and you sit up straight, and you take that, and it strengthens you when you face other difficulties that are even greater and deeper than that.
And you kind of think of also even though he might have been in pain, he's also helping the person that's helping him.
Yes.
Because you can't get too wound up on focusing on that pain that you're enduring, but you're also helping the person that's trying to help you through that, whatever it is you have to do. Mm-hmm. I have another example of stoicism that I'd like to bring forward about under deployment. We were getting ready to go into Desert Storm, and I was stationed in Germany at the time, and I was responsible for loading out the line. One of the things that happened was one of the commanders called out and said, he wanted to mix the load. That's just something that we never did.
When you say load, you mean?
So when we load aircraft, it's all live or it's all training. We never mix the two. And then in this particular instance, and with good reason on his behalf, he made a call in the heat of war, in the heat of preparing to get into war. And I was still this, go by the book, we don't do that. I had my reason. But the good thing about him is that stoicism I'm talking about, or we're talking about, is that under that particular instance, when he's leading his men into battle, he is getting ready to take off with his flight of aircraft and go to a place that's far away, that doesn't have a whole lot of support. He needed this to happen in a way that he saw fit. And instead of losing his cool, saying, "You will do," he did none of that. He had a grace about him. He explained it very clearly. I accepted, thank goodness, what he asked for, because I think the approach that he took with me, he didn't know me. We're over the phone. We're practicing this day in, day out, but this is the real thing. And the thing is that his ability to communicate in that way, I think it was a little bit of stoicism maybe on both of our parts, because I could have made it more difficult just being obstinate. But at the end of that, watching those aircraft take off into the lower ceiling, it still, to me, to this day, brings tears to my eye, because, he was able to present himself in a way, and thinking about his men, those things that he had to do to get to where he needed to go, and still had grace and calmness about him, that he didn't get riled, which means, reading about him later, he had to go in some pretty precarious things, and he didn't get riled then either. And those stories are amazing to me.
So it's interesting, because there's obedience, there's service, servant leader, all wrapped into that story. The obedience that you showed, and not pushing back and just saying, okay, this is what I have to do, and I'll do it. His servant leadership for his men.
Yes.
It's very deep.
And another thing that he mentioned is that he would take responsibility. That's another one that he didn't have to say that. He could left me hanging, and things could have went, but it didn't. And number one is that he wanted to alleviate that, because he says, I'm making this call. I want you to understand I'm taking responsibility for this. But he saw what needed to happen beyond what I could see. Mm-hmm. And I had to trust him as well. So,
yes.
Wow, it was so good.
Trust is a whole other element of manhood, right? And trust is given. It's not earned.
Right.
It's many people think it's the other way around, but it's really I give you my trust.
Right.
And so that, it's a beautiful story and a tremendous experience. I look at this poem also and think about, he says, silent whenever the harsh condemn. And I was just reading this morning about our Lord. how when he was condemned, he never defended himself.
Right.
He was silent. And what an important element of manhood that is, to avoid that justification or defense and to accept criticism, admonishment, and to accept it with grace.
Yes.
It's another beautiful aspect of manhood that we, as a culture, are kind of losing that aspect. But I want to tell everybody right now, you are listening to St. Joseph Radio, and we're coming to you from St. Louis, Missouri, the Rome of the West. So, Michael, when you heard that poem, what was the first thing you thought about?
The consistency, what he is doing. It starts out with he is dedicated. He is wholeheartedly all in. Mm-hmm. And the ability to maintain that, regardless of what comes before him, and maintaining that in a reality of, yes, this world sometimes beats on you.
Yes.
But that's one of the things, that consistency.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost like a primer for young men who have the desire for fatherhood, to be husbands. Reading a poem like this and other works that describe manhood, it should be required reading in a way, because it's a great process to go through and to say, okay, what is he saying about this? What is this man? This man comes across as a completely imperfect man who's doing a perfect job of being a father to his family.
Right.
He may have a million other imperfections, but what he's really honed in on is the perfection of being a father and the necessity of that.
And that word necessity is so important, because there's a lot of things that are distractions, a lot of things that can go wrong in how you conduct yourself. But that way of going about it, where you're denying yourself, denying whatever things that could come along your way, to make sure that the family is provided for, that things are taken care of for the family. Mm-hmm. That's another sign of manhood.
Well, and it speaks of accountability.
Yes.
And the necessity for men, for all of us, to be accountable to all things. And, when it comes to accountability, I remember I learned a very valuable lesson from one of the owners of the company that I spent 33 years working for. And very early on in my employment, there was a problem. We had created a problem by the way we shipped material. And my boss immediately took control, because he wanted to show me how we handled these problems. And he handled it quickly and concisely and authoritatively. And afterwards he turned to me and said, this is the way we do things. When we have a problem, we run to it and we face it head on. We never kick the can down the road. We never rely on somebody else to fix it for us. You cover that like a landmine. And by the way, he was a former Marine. So you cover it like it's a landmine, because it's the most important thing for you at that moment. It is the single most important thing that you have to do.
Oh, that's good. That's very good. So I had, and I may have told this story before, but one of the pivotal moments for me at the beginning of my military is this supervisor that I had. He was the leader of my section, and I had come into work 5 days late, 5 days in a row. By that fifth day, the security forces came to my room to get me out of bed and get me to go to work. I thought I was done.
You were quiet quitting?
Right. It was one of those where you didn't have your I was young. But so I go in before him, I report, and he has a different approach of correcting. He says, you know what? I'm going to have you do an activity starting tomorrow. So this is Friday, next day being Saturday. And I'm like, okay. And then he says, you're going to do Falcon Fun Day. And I was like, what? So I had an idea of it, but it was one of these things where, families get together and you do everything you can to support, showing the family what the military member does. I hated it. I hated every part of it. I hated it being somebody that had to be going in on a Saturday. That's my Saturday, I kept thinking. But I went through that. I thought it was really good. I actually did really well with it, helping kids, and doing all these different things. And so time goes on. Of course, learning from that, I did a better job of, reporting on time. I actually really got into my job because I didn't want to repeat that. And maybe that was my focus, but it changed me. Months later, he put me in for an award. And I was like, okay, that's really great. I have been doing better. But part of that award was that Falcon Fun Day.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, but what I don't understand or really reason why, until years later. But after that, it wasn't long before I was put in for Airman of the Year.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, he put me on a different path in such a way. He held me accountable. But, in that instance or in that moment, he could have done a host of things. He could have docked my pay. He could have written me up, put a bad mark on my record, something that would have, I had to persist with and get through. But instead, he took a different approach. This guy was a Vietnam War veteran. At this time, it's very early in the 80s. And he's one of those guys that had been in. He's looking at me like, you've got to take my place. But he took the time to do things differently. He thought about it. I don't know if he even knows, that was the outcome. But it was an absolute pivotal moment for me and shaped everything. I wanted to do things better because of that. And so, when somebody, even though they can hold you accountable in such different ways, he took that approach.
And even in that story, Michael, the correction that came with being accountable, they held you accountable and gave you a correction, and how you were able to embrace that correction and turn it into something that really blossomed in your life. And I think sometimes we miss the mark. Men miss the mark on being corrected. We take it personal. My boss doesn't like me, or there's so many excuses that we give. But if we would pause and really contemplate what and why this has happened to me, it could change the trajectory of your career and of your life.
And I can tell you without a doubt that was a preparation of my parents. So they never wavered on there was a consequence for your actions. And that, to me, set that moment for when my supervisor comes along. So that was an output of what they had done before. And I don't think people can have that kind of reaction unless they've been prepared to those early days of correction.
I would agree with that, yes.
And if you can accept that you're being corrected when you're 6 years old, then it should be a little bit easier correction when you're 20.
Yes, yes. Well, sometimes, too, in giving correction, I know that I managed people for a good part of my career. And there are times when, in giving correction, you actually point out to the person, this is a roadmap. And it's a roadmap not just to overcome this incident. It's a roadmap to say, how do we build a better path for you? And the thing for me that I always found interesting in managing people is that at that point you're giving them a choice. And it's the same choice we have in life and our faith, right?
Right.
I have a friend who likes to describe our faith as, well, the Catholic Church gives you a roadmap to get to heaven. You may choose another route. Maybe you'll get there. But if you follow this roadmap, the church is telling you you can get to heaven. So giving people that roadmap, so to speak, in correcting them, we're doing this because, and I see in you the ability to grow and do better. I think sometimes when you tell people that you're doing this because you believe in them, but not in the state that they are now,
right,
you see more in them.
And that's a vision that a leader has.
Yes.
A vision of, I can see you doing something in the future if you stay this course.
Yes.
If you don't correct this thing, I can also see the path. And that's that vision that they have for you. Boy, what a blessing to have somebody like that in your life.
Which requires patience.
Yes.
On behalf of the person being corrected, you have to be patient with the process. Okay, this person sees something in me, and they've asked me to undertake this. Now I have to have the patience to let God and time and experience all come together in God's time, and that vision will be fulfilled. But I have to be patient with it, which is so hard for us as
Americans.
As Americans,
we want everything now,
yes.
right? We want justice now. We want things done now.
Right.
And that's the hardest thing to get across, to understand that there has to be a patience and a process to work through those things and allow that process to work. I mean,
when I believe that that's a challenge that young men, especially today,
Sure.
are faced with. You and I come from, our backgrounds are age-wise similar. Yes, we want results and we want them now. I would never say that I'm immune to that.
Right.
I would have been born in the 1700s. Maybe it felt differently. But living as we did coming up in the 20th century, we very much have that. We want results. We're
Yes.
Americans. We want to see it. But today, it seems amplified even more, where the mere thought of waiting is just out of the question. No, I can't wait. I want it now. You hear this now when people are talking about young people coming into job positions. They're working for a company for 3 months.
I want a raise.
And they want a raise, and they want to be going to the board meeting. And that's not even a joke. I mean,
No,
that's
it's real.
absolutely
That is
true.
real. Yeah.
And it's just indicative of a lack of patience, a lack of understanding what it means to be accountable, what it means to just work and to endure and sustain, bearing the whips and the scorns of life.
Well, and I can tell you, one of my supervisors, he had such a great example. He was a marathon runner.
Oh,
And
I don't like him.
but the way he said is that in industry, it's not the same as you were in the military, where there's always this upward mobility, upward movement. In industry, things take time, and that he says you have a formula for doing the right things. Just keep doing it consistently,
Yes.
and that opportunity will come. But you have to be consistent first.
Yes. So you have been listening to Man on the St. Joseph Radio Network. We're going to take a quick station break, and we'll be back to you in a few moments. When we come back, we're going to talk about beauty and charity and courage and respect and love. So don't go away.
Hi, this is Matt Loggeman with St. Joseph Radio with a great gift idea. A St. Benedict bracelet, a trendy accessory for men, women, and children that not only looks good on everyone's wrist, but is actually armor for the spiritual battlefield. This unique bracelet is handmade in Europe and contains 10 medals within the braided cord in the adult size and 7 medals in the children's size. On the front of each beautiful medal is St. Benedict holding a cross in his right hand, the object of his devotion. On the back of each medal is a cross. Surrounding the back of the medal and cross are the letters VRSN MVSMQLIVB, in Latin reference which translates, "Begone, Satan. Never tempt me with your vanities. What you offer me is evil. Drink the poison yourself." And finally, located at the top is the word Pax, which means peace. All bracelets come packaged with an informational card and a St. Benedict blessing which your local priest can administer. This gift is for everyone you love and care about, including yourself. Available from St. Joseph Radio. Check the website at www.saintjosephradio.net.
St. Joseph Catholic Radio is proud to announce the launch of SJEN TV, the St. Joseph Evangelization Network. SJEN TV is a premier online Catholic broadcasting network providing quality Catholic programming 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have programming such as live studio interviews, St. Joe's Java speaker presentations, current Catholic issues, and the Pro-Life series. We're featuring the many talented speakers out of Orange County, California, and this Archdiocese of St. Louis, Missouri, including Professor John Gresham, Father James Mason, Karen Nokemper, Rick Hollerick, Bill Federer, and many more. To review the program list, go to sjen.tv or on Roku, SJEN TV. All this programming is free, and we are welcoming sponsorship of new programs. Find out more at sjen.tv.
Welcome back, everyone. You are listening to Man, a program on St. Joseph Radio, coming to you from St. Louis, Missouri, the Rome of the West. So we've spent the past half an hour talking about the elements of manhood. And as we start this next portion of the program, I'm reminded of something that comes from the Imitation of Christ, a quotation that really says so much about manhood and the requirements of manhood. And the quotation is this: Take your coat off and stand up like a man to the devil's treacherous assault. If you wake up every morning and those are your first thoughts, how prepared are we then, more prepared, to face the devil's treacherous assaults? Because he doesn't take days off. And there are so many opportunities in the day to fall prey. But what we want to talk about are the opportunities that lift up and encourage and help men, young men, old men, grow. And in talking about the elements of manhood, when we talked about the poem by Edgar Guest, we talked about all of the things that stood out from that poem, things like accountability, love, respect, courage, beauty, and charity. And one that I want to start us off with is beauty. One of the things that occurs to me is that classically, if you think of in the home, very often you'll see the mom who decorates the house, the mom who has certainly a taste, and absolutely unequivocally, she's the best person in that role in probably 99% of the circumstances. Not that men can't or don't or shouldn't, but moms just have a much better feel. Spouses do. Yet, that doesn't mean that men don't have a role to play in bringing beauty to their family. And there are many, many opportunities. There's beauty in Catholic art. There's beauty in architecture. And some of the things that can be done to bring that beauty to light, really, they lift up and they draw you closer to something beautiful, and that something beautiful is God.
Absolutely.
Anytime we've gone somewhere that was new or foreign to us, we learned a long time ago from a dear friend, a priest friend of ours, if you're in a foreign place, seek out the cathedral. Go and look, start there and see what's there. And when you do, when you start to find beautiful churches or historic sites, it so enriches and fulfills a family. And dads can be very much a part of that. The one care that I would offer is that dad should be a part of it, but it shouldn't be dad alone having that interest or desire.
True.
Making sure that everyone is experiencing this in a way. In other words, Dad, if your interest is to go see Major League Baseball parks around the country, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but that may be you fulfilling your dream of beauty. It works way better when you're fulfilling the family's dream of finding beauty and experiencing it together.
What I like that you had guidance from our priests in their studies and the things that the aestheticism, the thing that shows beauty is important to guide our eyes. Modern day beauty may not have that same depth. Look at things differently, and what I appreciate is that our priests have had that experience, have read about art in so many different ways, and can bring forth our faith as well. With the guidance towards the church is fantastic because, again, when we look at art, it should represent the beauty that God brings into the world. Another thing is nature itself.
Yes.
A lot of times that we get bombarded by all the different media things, getting outside and seeing the beauty of God
yes.
in everything. Driving in today, there was the beauty of spring as things are starting to bud, things are starting to turn green. This is a beautiful time of the year, just as it is, I think fall is beautiful too. Mm-hmm. But the nature, and my son does a lot of hiking and skiing and all these different things. I'm always amazed at the photos that he brings because he says that's what talks to him about God.
Yes.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's and for men to be able to bring that beauty and help lead mom in finding places of beauty, it's a great responsibility, and it really lifts you up as a man. Art is not just paintings. I may have shared this before. I have an interest in poetry. I'm by no means an expert in poetry, but I was brought up in a time when boys didn't do poems. A boy who did a poem was less than a man. And lo and behold, I was fishing with my father-in-law, who was a man's man. At one time held two very, very distinct records for hunting and fishing. Has been certified, if you will, as record holders. And here we are on a boat, and randomly he starts to recite Rudyard Kipling's Gunga Din poem, which is many, many stanzas, word for word. And I was taken aback, and it must have shown on my face. I had a look on my face that he looked at me and said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "You know poetry." Well, of course I know poetry. Anybody who's a man should know poetry. And of course I was very embarrassed because I knew nothing, but it really intrigued me. And I asked my wife, I was like, "Did you know your dad knows poetry?" She said, "Well, yeah, he used to read poems to us all the time." And it gave me permission to go and start to read poetry. And then once I did that, with our children who were very young at the time, I started sharing with them poems that influenced me. That over the years, our families had a great interest in poetry and a great love for poetry. So, give yourself permission to dive into an art that maybe you feel is foreign to you or you don't understand. Give yourself permission and learn about it and appreciate it and enjoy it. Bring that beauty to your family.
That's wonderful. I like that. Yeah.
So courage. In your military career, you probably had more opportunities to experience and witness courage than most people in a lifetime.
So the stories that pilots tell are always interesting. And I will share this one that was on duty, and it's what's called a CAT. So we're sitting and talking amongst the other folks that are there. And one particular, the leader, he's a colonel, talked about while he was in a flight, Desert Storm, how important it was to intimidate your opponent. And he flew F-15s, and his flight was like 5 F-15s, a mile apart. He called this thing a Tiger Claw. And what happens is the contrails off the aircraft, your exhaust is putting this line in the sky. But then when you're coming from an advantage point, coming down on your enemy, this Tiger Claw, it's kind of intimidating because it just looks like you're coming from everywhere.
Oh, wow.
And that story to me, I was like, okay, I get, and he had a bravado about it, but it wasn't like over the top. It's just a realization of the immense power that he had at that time. And of course, the other aircraft scattered, but living through that and listening to these stories, I think is just amazing. But and it is a different kind of courage, but yes, there's others as well.
Well, there are, and military courage is always kind of like the apex, right? Same thing with first responders. Their level of courage is off the charts. But when we speak of courage, we don't limit it to that.
Right.
In manhood, courage comes from even the courage to go and ask for a raise. To be able to go and do that takes courage.
Yes.
My recommendation is when you go to do that, come fully prepared with why you deserve the raise. It's not because you bought a new car and your car payment has gone up.
Right.
That's usually, I'll just give you a little inside tip, that's usually not a good argument. But to be able to assemble what it is you think, why you think that way, well planned out, and then articulated, it requires courage, it requires preparation.
Yes.
And when done well, it will be fruitful, even if the answer is no. Because if you do it well, the person you're requesting the raise from is going to be compelled to tell you why.
You're going to walk away with something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Even if it's something that you had to learn
Yes.
or expose something that you didn't know about.
So many times we sit in our desk or at home and we lament and we imagine all the reasons why we're underpaid or why it's so much better when we have the courage to assemble our thoughts and to go and have an open conversation. And that's a part of manhood, is being able to have that discussion where I can say to you, I have this idea, this thought, this is what I think needs to be done.
Right.
All too often now we do that electronically instead of person to person.
Right, and there is a bit of courage when you come forward with an idea or you have a challenge of some sort that you're bringing before somebody, and be able to be willing to have the critique come back. Mm-hmm. There's so many times you just throw a bomb out there and think that, I let them know what was going on.
Right.
But that's not enough. You really need to have that conversation and be willing to have the, what comes back to you as something either you're learning about, something that you need to reason out, assess.
Yes.
What can I change? And you're not going to know that unless you have that discussion.
Exactly. Going back to the poem, as the poem draws to an end, something that stands out to me is Guest says, doing with courage, stern and grim, the deeds that his father did for him. And what a beautiful thing. There's the charity of being able to say, I received this gift, and I want to share it with you. I want to give it to you. And it's a beautiful and you would say natural idea, natural thought. But there's a part of our culture today that I think really puts a cloud over that. And that is the idea of how many people have grown up in a broken home.
Yeah.
So doing the deeds that his father did for him, if dad's not there on a regular basis, that creates somewhat of a disconnect. So it's a dark cloud, right? But I think there is a silver lining to that. And that's one of the things you and I have tried to do over the past year. And that is find ways to provide for young men who had come up in a broken home an avenue where they could have a mentor or a friend a bit older that they can say, what do I do in this situation? How do I overcome this? And this is our moment to just ask older gentlemen who may be listening to us to reach out and take into consideration the idea of the effect of not having that person who could hand down their wisdom to you on a regular basis. I think that's one of the critical parts that puts our culture in the situation that it's in today.
Right.
So we've asked this before, we've said this before, we're probably never going to say it until they take us off the air, but men our age, men of wisdom, we need you. The world needs you, and the future needs you. When you go downstairs after Mass for coffee, go downstairs and look for a younger man. Introduce yourself to him. Talk to him. You don't have to volunteer to be a mentor. Just talk to him. You'd be amazed how much that influences the people that in our generation or in that generation.
Absolutely. And one of the things coming up in my life is the one thing that I've been so thankful for and so blessed with is knowing my father. Mm-hmm. I've had others that, when they fill out forms, I don't know who my dad is. That is so sad, but a reality.
Yes.
And when you come across those things, that's why this is the only things that these steps that we take are the things that make our society better.
Yes.
And it's not going to be overnight, and it's not going to be, very quick.
And it's not going to be a political party on either side.
No.
Or an elected official. It's organic.
Yes.
And it comes about when people decide this is something I can offer. We all have something that we can offer. I was recently at Mass, and the priest gave a very short homily where he made the obvious observation, which is God has given to each of us a talent and the grace to have that talent. He gives us mercy. He gives us so many things, but the skills and talents that he has given to us, when we die and he asks us, what have you done with them? How will you answer that question?
Right.
And, as we go on in years through our chapters of life, you need to start thinking, how have I used the skills and talents that God has given to me?
Right. Realize there's still opportunity, but
yes,
that time is coming to a close.
And not only opportunity, but in a Shark Tank kind of way, there is opportunity where people need and are looking for the product of your knowledge.
Yes.
There's a need. So you don't have to look far to find people who will be interested in it. So that's our appeal for charity in a different sense, the charity of your time, your knowledge, your wisdom, and even just your friendship, a smile at someone that says, hey, I get it. I see what you're going through.
Right. So, different vein, but still
Yes.
under the idea of charity or love. When I was on deployment coming back, I ran into a chaplain along the way, and it kind of hit my life in two different ways. Being on this deployment was really rough.
Where were you?
Saudi Arabia, Riyadh, and then during that deployment, my wife, we were having twins, but during that deployment, on Thanksgiving of all days, she started to miscarry, and in that, I was absolutely devastated. Here I am, thousands of miles away at home. But the fortunate thing, the providence, was that we were close to family. But in that, I had a friend that was there who helped me through, being upset, being mad, all these different things. But at the end of the deployment, there was a chaplain there who gave me a flyer and says, "You're getting ready to go back home, and things have been dealt with while you were gone. So don't walk in thinking that you're just going to take over. You're going to pick up where you left off." And it was such a great reunion. I mean, my wife handled so many things while I was gone. And because of that reunion and that preparation, that was such a charity to me to have that advice, because I did probably think, I'm pretty sure I thought I would just jump in there and possibly take over where I didn't need to. But having that gentle way of coming back in and being advised to find out where you fit helped that reunion so much, and it really made a change for me and my wife. I mean, for our whole family, made a change for us that we understood how things flow being deployed. And I hope others can learn from that, is that no matter what, things are happening while you're gone. Realize that as a man that, the world does not stop because you left.
Well, and also that you're not the only one who can love your wife.
Right.
Love comes from a lot of different directions. You love her in a very special way.
Yes.
But that love is there in so many other avenues, right?
Absolutely.
And God provides for that through our love, through that love. You are listening to Man to Man on St. Joseph Radio, coming to you from St. Louis, Missouri, the Rome of the West. And love being such a broad topic and so universal, but as it relates to manhood and the elements of manhood, there's spousal love and there's fatherly love.
Yes.
There's love of neighbor. And in each situation, man has to step up and be aware and insert themselves in a way that is a true Christian Catholic love. So we've talked about loving someone when we correct them, loving them when we congratulate them, and loving, you touched on, loving someone in a tragic situation. I'm reminded of my wife had a cousin who unfortunately passed, but he developed muscular dystrophy. And I want to say he was around 5 years old. The life expectancy is maybe 5 or 6 years at the time, and he lived into his 30s. And I have never experienced such overreaching love as I did with her family through her cousin. Because while his mom and dad and siblings were the core, the center of that love, there wasn't a relative, an extended relative, cousin, uncle, in-law, not one of them who didn't pour their hearts out for this person. And it was, to me, one of the most beautiful examples of love I had ever seen, to the point where events were planned so that he could be there. Not just that he could be there. Events like camping in the Beartooth Mountains were planned for a young man who was essentially in an iron lung, so they brought a portable iron lung so that he could be there in a tent with his siblings and cousins and parents. That kind of love is an element of manhood, because what I noticed was that it was a reflection of the way his parents loved him. Mm-hmm. And his dad loved him to such a degree that he would devote an endless hours to finding ways to bring the world to his son and his son to the world. And that's an attribute that I really, I personally feel that I fall short of imitating it, but it's one that I aspire to.
That is a good story, and it reminds me of a guy that did triathlons. I don't know if you ever saw this, but his son had special needs. The one thing I will tell you about this story is that the son said that when he was being pushed by his father through a triathlon on this wheelchair, that he felt like he was running, which he could not have experienced unless that dad did what he did. So, I think he recently passed away, the dad did, but what a testament to what a dad can do.
Well, when you think about stoicism, I would share with you that John, and that was this young man's name, picture camping. It's the middle of summer. We're in the mountains, and the mosquitoes are everywhere. And he has no ability to move his arms to swat the mosquitoes away. And he would just sit, kind of lay fireside and be eaten alive. And occasionally he would say to one of his brothers, my cheek, my shoulder. But never did he want to go into the tent. Never did he want to go home, because the experience was much greater than the pain. And that experience was what made him who he was and helped him to grow. And I guess in it all that we've talked about in this hour, it's the experiences we have as men that make us who we are. And that to the degree that we have them and embrace them and endure them, good and especially bad, is what defines how we will go forward as men, and then also how we will form the young men and women that God gives to us and our spouse and our family.
Yes.
It's really quite a beautiful thing to recognize that manhood is tough. Manhood comes with scorns and whips of life.
But it's worthwhile.
Very much worthwhile. So when you think about men that you've known, is there anybody who comes to mind that you say, this is the ultimate, if I said to somebody, if you want to copy a man, imitate him? You weren't ready for that question.
No, that one I think there's so many examples. I couldn't nail it down to one. Mm-hmm. But I look around those that are at Mass, and everybody brings a different aspect of what they're able to do, the qualities that I'm looking for, and I think that's the encouragement that I try to glean on, try to emulate every day, because I see these examples, these small examples. So I don't necessarily know that anybody does everything,
No.
But it's all these little examples, things that men do, families, that consistency is the one thing that I could say is across the board.
Yes.
Showing up.
Yes.
That's a big one for me. If you keep showing up and doing what is needed to be done, those are the things I really find
I recently
impressive.
had someone tell me there were 3 ups. Wake up, show up, and man up.
That's right.
And that's what we're asking you, the Catholic men of America and St. Louis, to join us in Man Up. And thank you so much for listening today. And we have been so fortunate to have you. It's very gracious to be in your company. You're listening to St. Joseph Radio. This is Man to Man. I'm Mark Serafino, and this is Michael Hayworth. Thank you, and God bless you.
You've been listening to St. Joseph Radio Presents from the Rome of the West, St. Louis, Missouri. If you would like to join us in our evangelization efforts, you can order a copy of today's broadcast or any of our past programs by visiting us on our website, stjosephradio.net. That's SAINT, josephradio.net. Or call us 636-447-6000. It's all at your fingertips to help us evangelize the world, bringing the good news of Christ to everyone you meet and change one soul at a time. Thank you for your prayers and support. Until next time, may God bless you and your family. This has been a presentation of St. Joseph Radio Presents.